everybody. Welcome to another episode of Colubrid and Colubroid Radio. This is Zach, as always, and with me is Clint. How are you, man?
Tired, Zach. Tired. Need a nap, man, but still in a good mood and excited to be here, buddy. How you doing?
Yeah, I am tired as well. And we are tired because we attended Tinley this past weekend. So we'll be talking about that here shortly. Our guest tonight, this is going to be a fun one, is Terry Burwell of TB Snakes. Terry works with a lot of different snakes. He's definitely known for his pythons work. But tonight, obviously, we're on the Colubrid and Colubroid radio show, so we're going to be talking about his work with arboreal rear fang snakes. So we're going to be doing Boiga and Phylodryas baroni. We had a listener ask for a baroni episode, and at least a portion of this one is going to focus on that because Terry has excellent taste in snakes and has those in his collection. So we'll be getting to Terry here shortly, but before that, we need to do a Tinley recap. So Clint and I got to be together again.
It was beautiful. Absolutely.
Wasn't it beautiful? So I was at Tinley plugging the book and signing the book, and Clint was obviously representing Metazotics. And I think we both had a pretty good show. Would you agree?
Oh, 100% I would agree. I know it. I mean, obviously Metazotics as a company did fantastic while we were out there, and that really made me happy. Because when it comes to vending, I mean, let's face it, Tinley's not cheap. You know, just to be there, to spend a whole weekend, it's, you know, there's some expense. But I was very, very pleased with the turnout and very, very pleased from a business standpoint. But even more so, and I think we both experienced this. I mean, one, I can't tell you how many people I saw walking around carrying the book.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome.
And I was like, that's cool. I'm like, you know, I talked to every one of them too. And obviously how many people talk to us about the podcast. And
yes.
You know, I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But yeah, man, it was an absolute blast for me. How about you? Now, I know at one point, and for those of you that don't know Zach, you know, on here, we're both very, you know, we're big personalities and we have no problem with talking. But at one point, I walked over to where Zach was signing these books, and I looked at him, and he finally looks my direction. I said, "You look like a gorilla at the zoo," where he's just tired. He's not in where he wants to be. He just not his elements. And I couldn't help but laugh.
Yeah. I don't want anybody to think I didn't have a good time at Tinley, but we've talked about it here. And if you've listened to me on other podcasts, I am naturally introverted, and my social circle here in Northern West Virginia is about 6 people. And when I have to go to a reptile show that has 10, 20,000 people, I don't even know how many people there were. I mean, on Saturday from 10 to 3, that place is a total madhouse. If you looked at me and you're like, what's up with him? I was just, I believe psychologists call it flooding. I was like completely overwhelmed with humanity. And what it did, that was the first time I've been behind a table in my life. Every other show I've ever been to, I was the customer. So I was walking around looking, and I have a brand new respect for people who are on the other side of the table, because it was great. It was very overwhelming. And what was also incredibly overwhelming was the response to the book in person. Up until now, all the book sales have been through Instagram and Facebook, and we all know what that whole digital interface with humanity is like. And this was very different. It was crazy because Russ's booth was the very first booth when you walked through the door. And I don't want to give the impression like everybody was buying the book, but there were a fair number of people buying the book. And if you were one of the people that ran through the door, there were about half a dozen, straight to the table and said, "This is why I came. I just want you to know how special that is to me," because putting in the 2 years to write the book and hunt down all the photographs and make sure everything was right and dealing with the final process, it was for those moments like that vindicated the effort and made me want to do it again, because I realized that this really is a enterprise worth doing. And the whole mission was to celebrate these snakes that they definitely have a following, but they're not like corns and milks and kings. And it was just very humbling to talk to everybody. And what was also really weird for me, and my students, I had 6 students at the show, and they were jabbing at me. One of them was today, is like the fact that people wanted to get a picture of me with them holding the book. I was kind of like, what is this?
Yes,
this is cool.
Absolutely.
And some of those photographs are probably pretty damn funny, because I was like, wow, this is a thing. Cool. But I was a little bit like taken aback that was something, because I'm just in Wheeling, I'm a snake nerd that wrote a book on snakes and takes care of snakes, and people kind of look at me like, what the hell is this? He's got 100 snakes in his house. What? But when you're with your people, it was just very, very different. So if you were one of those people, thank you so much for all the praise, and it really meant a lot to me. So thanks. And you, and then on the podcast front, holy hell. Holy hell. We look at numbers and we look at graphs, and we try to make sure we're data freaks for different reasons, which I think makes us it's fun that Clint does the business side and I do the like analytics, sociology. I don't know what the hell it is. I just like to look at graphs because I'm a nerd. And we can see that uptick when we do a topic people like or things in our graphs, but it's another thing to be at a show, and about every 10 minutes for 2 days, somebody walks up to you and says, thank you so much for doing what you're doing.
Yes.
Could you do a show on this? Could you do a show on that? And at one point I sat down and just got my notebook out and wrote all the topics people asked for. So we may be doing more of these meet and greet events in the future, because this was pretty badass.
It was incredible. I mean, it was... a few things about the podcast over the weekend that, I mean, it was a very humbling experience. Yes. It showed us, it wasn't an ego boost in any way. Instead, it was what we were attempting to achieve is happening, and it was just so exciting. I went several times throughout the week. I talked to a friend of the show, Jason Hood, one of our former guests. And his booth is right by the doors by the bathroom, so I'd seen him a lot. And but we would chat, and he mentioned, he goes, I have no doubt that you guys are getting a lot of attention over there, because I know how many people are coming over and bringing up the episode he was on to him. And it was so true, because like you said, it's every few minutes. I mean, someone would come up and bring it up and talk about the podcast and talk about an episode they liked, or, something they'd like to hear. And it was just so cool. It got to the point that the guy who was helping me at my booth, a friend of mine, was teasing me. Yes. All weekend about
he teases both, actually.
Yes, he did. He did. But I mean, it was just such a cool experience. And I want to say, I mean, I think Zach and I both thank you all so much, for that. Everyone who came up and introduced yourselves to us while we were out there, it really did mean a lot. I was thrilled to have those conversations. And what it really did for me, and I think for Zach as well, is just energize us even more to want to come back and, okay, what else are we going to talk about? What are we going to do? What can we put out there that are going to help people?
Exactly.
It's going to, really make it palatable and digestible for everyone. So, thanks. Thank you all. I mean, it really was the highlight of the weekend. And I mean, and I love Tinley every year anyway. To me, it's such a cool thing. I loved getting to meet all your students that came out there, Zach. You could tell that they were having a blast. And so that's just, so fun to watch. And so that was really neat. Getting to Russ, I met him for the first time, out there. Billy Hunt, if you're listening, buddy, I got to meet him for the first time in person. And so many friends that, I've had for years. So it was definitely an interesting Tinley. It was a good show. And I mean, I came back just tired. But I came back and just floating on cloud nine. I tell you.
Yeah, I flew out there and I flew home, and
because he's a diva.
Yes, because I'm a diva. And that's right, diva me. But the joke was on me because I got delayed on the runway, and I'm cheap, so I got the cheapest ticket I could get. So all 6'2", 250 pounds of me was crammed in the last seat by the window. And every freaking time I fly, I end up with two other Zachs in my row. It's never small people. It's always 6 foot plus guys. And we were like, they taxi out there and they're like, well, there's a problem. We're going to sit here. So I got back home at 1 in the morning and then got up, came to school, but I was same deal. It was just a wonderful, wonderful time. And I'm just happy I went. And I went last year and I went this year, and I feel like I may not have looked as much the first year, but I also felt like Colubrids were more present this year. Mm-hmm. And there's 1 or 2 tables that have the oddballs that I like. And it was kind of nice to see multiple tables that had oddballs. I don't want to give the impression there was tons of diversity, but there was way more diversity than there was last year, and that gave me a little bit of hope. I kind of had this intention of like, I'm going to go there and I'm not going to get anything. And I ended up having more pickups than I probably should have, because a lot of the animals that I needed to kind of finish out some of my pairs and things, which are not obscure, but not overly common, were there. Like Ashley Denizen had a male Japanese rat snake, and it was a European bloodline. I needed a male so I could get to 2.2, and the Zirkles had the black milk snake males that were adults, and I was like, well, crap, I need those too. And I distinctly remember when I went in 2022, I walked the whole show like multiple times, and I wasn't behind a table then, and I got some locality Cali Kings, and that was it. So hopefully, I've heard that Daytona is the Colubrid show, and I would like to see Tinley kind of head in the direction of Daytona. I can never get to Daytona. There is one weekend a year that I have to be at West Liberty. It's the weekend before school starts, and that is always the weekend of Daytona. So,
and I was just about to say, we need to do a CCR episode, like from Daytona, but I guess I'll just go and tell you about it.
I have plans. We have a new president at the university who's much more flexible than previous presidents. So maybe I can pull this off. I don't know.
I like the sound of it. Well, I didn't know that you had pickups, Zach. I didn't know that you were taking anything home. Well, so that's
the worst thing was Russ, because Russ and I are the same person when it comes to taste. And I looked over, he's got his animals, started putting them out on the table, and everybody knows me as the king snake guy and the locality king snake guy. And I'm looking as he's pulling these. I didn't even know he had animals. And I was like, oh crap. Those are those airport kings from Southern California where the airport's gone and it's a golf course. Like, I did the whole thing, and I love that. I love when herpetoculture keeps a line of animals alive that's been extirpated in the wild. Like, that story to me is fantastic. Well, Russ is all about that story too. So, I asked him, are those? And he was like, yes, that's those. And it was an adult pair, and he had raised them, and they came home. So, so anyway, but no, it was good. I'm happy I went. I loved meeting all of you and all the people. And that's pretty much all we have to say. And thank you if you came up and talked to us.
Well, I'll say the pickups before we move past it. The pickups that I had, mainly it was I got some things for the shop, some things that I would had run out of, that kind of thing. I did pick up another adult black milk. That that because that was fun, right?
Yes, it was.
In short, we picked that up from a friend, and Zach was over there getting one as well.
Yes,
ends up somebody was cash in hand about to buy it, so Zach kind of has to walk right in front of them carrying these snakes away. But there was another thing it's interesting. It's not necessarily Colubrid, but it was the way it kind of fell in my lap while out there. So Bailey, the gentleman who was at the table with me, he's working out a deal with another mutual friend for some geckos of some sort. And she says that she, would be happy to get some Dominican mountain boas, a pair of those. And she saw somebody who had some. So he goes over and works out a deal with these to get these Dominican boas, goes over to her or brings her over to the table, and she's looking at them. Well, they're both male. And she was wanting a pair. And so he's now got these two males. So he figures out, okay, how much cash with one male, this or that. With her, locks it down, but he doesn't need this other Dominican mountain boa. So I now have a Dominican mountain boa. And it's one where I didn't need it, but I have always kind of wanted to check them out, know. When they fire up, they really look good. So that would be the most unusual thing, I guess, that I'm coming back with, but did bring back some neat frogs. And how do I not come back with some cool frogs? And I'm literally set up behind Josh's frogs, and Josh is standing right there next to me for 2 days. So brought some other cool stuff back for the shop. So that was fun.
Fantastic. It's funny you got a Dominican mountain boa, because right before Tinley happened, I've been trying to move all the Boyds out of my collection. But I have a soft spot for weird boas, and I saw a pair of Haitian boas, which are basically Dominican red mountain boas, only they're the like brown version.
Yep.
And I messaged the guy, and I'm now using false water cobras as currency. So, so I was like, would you by chance be interested in X number of false water cobras for those boas? And I didn't think he was going to bite. And he was like, yeah, I would be. So I now have a pair of Haitian boas, which are, I think, Colubroid, or I can't say that genus name to save my life. But anywho, yeah. But they're really cool. They're in an exo in quarantine right now in my house, and they're very nocturnal. So, like not just nocturnal, like the lights go out within 10 minutes, they're doing zooms around the enclosure. Wow. So, they were fun. They started, I put my kid in charge of those, just making sure everything was okay while I was at Tinley, and he was sending me videos of them moving around and everything. So,
see, here's the bad part is how busy I am since I walked in to the shop with that boa, I haven't seen it since. Steve took it, set it up, in quarantine, put it away. I've not even got to look at it again. It's been a hectic time. After a show is always busy. After a 2.5, 3 day show, putting all that up. But that's funny. I've not got to notice their behavior at all yet.
There you go. Well, I just told you about it, so now you can go see it.
That's right.
Okay. Well, I think we're ready to jump into this. So our guest tonight, as mentioned before, he's been on several podcasts, and we're happy to have him on ours, is Terry Burwell, TB Snakes. Terry, how you doing tonight?
Doing great, guys. Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, we're happy to have you. So with all this, I know that you keep quite a few pythons. So just for the hell of it, even though we're not the Python show, but we're on the Python network. So if you don't mind just kind of giving a rundown of those, and then, we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. So if I mentally walk through my rooms, there's diamond pythons. Let me do the whole room. Colubrid, Dan.
That right there is already cool, Terry.
Yeah.
Diamond pythons are just awesome, man.
Yeah. So I say that because I have a cool room and a warm room. And so my diamond pythons and rhino rat snakes are in one room by themselves. And then, so diamond pythons, rhino rat snakes, and then rough scale pythons, Savu pythons, Sumatran short tail pythons. I do the caramels and the het caramels. So my breeder pair is a VPI caramel and then a het. So I produce both caramels and hets. Those are the pumpkin head ones. Really, really like those. Let's see. Cool. I have a Madagascar tree boa, annulated boas. I say Angolan pythons, and then for the boiga, the Boiga melanata, Boiga latifasciata, Boiga cyanea, and Boiga cynodon, as well as the Barron's racers and ball pythons. I have a small collection. I'm dedicated to the Sumapide project. So cool. If it's not have anything to do with the Sumapide project, I don't keep it. This year was my last year breeding lavenders, so I'm getting rid of those, and then it's all just going to be focused on that one little project. And I think that is it. Yeah.
Cool. So obviously lots of boids, but there seems to be a theme with your colubrids.
Yeah. So rhino rat snakes and black milk snakes built my entire collection. So I got some black milk snakes from Dawn Shores, and I got some rhino rat snakes, and I was fortunate I had success with those very early on. And then as those bred and I sold those offspring, then I got into rough scale pythons, and then I got into annulated boas, and then I sold those offspring, and then I got into more and more and more, and to what it is now.
Very cool. But I tell you, before we go too far into, what you got here, I'm kind of a background guy. I love to know how you came about, so it's, I kind of asked this of all of our guests, were you always into reptiles as a kid? Was your family, take us from the beginning on kind of how you got involved and the evolution of it, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. It was ever since the beginning. So grew up on the banks of the Missouri River in Fort Benton, Montana. My dad was not afraid of snakes. It was one of those things I rode around with him all the time. And if there was a bull snake crossing the road, we'd stop and he'd help get it on the other side of the road. And if it was a rattlesnake, he'd kill it and cut off the rattle and give it to me, Then there was a lot of garter snakes in that area as well. So I had positive experiences with snakes from a very, very early age. And I was fascinated with them from a very, very early age. I can remember going to reptile gardens back when you could ride the tortoises.
Right.
And
before that was frowned upon.
Exactly. Yeah. And so our family my grandma was in Nebraska. And so whenever we'd drive through, we'd stop at reptile gardens. And that was a very, memory forming and, I think interest shaping time in my life. And then, from Montana, we moved to Kansas when I was in second grade. Ooh. So the perfect time in my childhood to move to a small town where you have a bicycle, which just equals total freedom. And, the town was 100 people in Southeast Kansas. And so, ringneck snakes and black snakes, it was really, really good. So I didn't realize how great Kansas was for that sort of thing. And I was in 4-H. I did the reptiles and amphibians, module in 4-H and got to go to the University of Kansas. That's when I can still remember they had a captive alligator, and we got to hold a ball python. It was the first, python I held in my life. I still remember that. I remember seeing the specimens, going into the rooms and seeing all the specimens and just geeking out over that and thinking that was so cool. And then we moved from Kansas to Wyoming, which is the maybe worst place for aspiring herper. And so in that, I think my parents placated me with a Noah's Ark of species in my room. So so it was and it just kind of went from there. I was homeschooled in 8th grade, and my dad and I, we built a shed. The whole plan was to raise bearded dragons. Bearded dragons was kind of coming up. I was a Reptiles Magazine subscriber. I was a Vivarium Magazine subscriber. The educational coordinator for the Vivarium Magazine, Dan McCarran, was a biology teacher in my town. My sister, it was my sister's biology teacher.
That's crazy.
That's neat.
And so I went to my sister's parent teacher conference so that I could see his collection, and that was really cool. And he introduced me to the Vivarium Magazine and advanced herpetoculture, all that systems, and Philippe de Vogely and all that. And so I was reading those documents from a very young age. Anyway, wanted to breed bearded dragons at a large scale. And so we built this shed, moved all of my animals from my bedroom into the shed. And I'd say most of them died within like a 6-month period, or a 6-week period. Sorry. Baseboard heaters in Wyoming are not a great heating source for a reptile room. And so I think that was kind of a big part of it. And so after that, I was like, that's it. Didn't have any reptiles, and for a while, and that was and I got into Burmese pythons, and I took Burmese pythons from college from high school all the way into college, and
so bearded dragon to Burmese python.
That's right. So, you know what's funny?
I just make sure I'm understanding. Just seeing I see the gateway.
To this day, I've never owned a bearded dragon. Like, we built the shed for that, and I've never owned one yet.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And
well, you know what? First up, before you move past it, kudos to your dad, because it sounds like he really supported the hell out of you getting into this. So that's awesome on his part.
Yeah, he really was. And it's kind of funny. There was a portion of there, post college. I did a lot of things, right? I was a ski bum for a while. I traveled around the world for a couple of years, and then I came back and just didn't really have like a career, right? Mm-hmm. There was a time when he said, "Hey, man, maybe you shouldn't have any snakes." Like, I was living in Charleston, and I had part-time jobs, and wasn't making ends meet. But I bought a Colombian rainbow boa, and then I bought a scrub python. And my parents called me. They called me as I was coming back from buying the scrub python. They said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm not gonna lie to my parents, And I said, "Well, I just went up to south of the border, it's a little town on the Carolina border. Said I just came up here and met this guy. I bought a scrub python." And there was just silence on the end of the line. And, like, I'd ask my mom for rent money, those months before, stuff. And she said, "Do you think that was a smart idea?" And I said, "Well, it's cheaper than antidepressants," is what I said. And she couldn't argue with that. And so, but after that, I did get an adult job, and I have found myself in my life where I had time or I had money, but I very rarely had both.
Time, and
then after I met my wife in 2013, I got an apartment in 2014 in Austin, the same day of Arlington. And so I went so we drove to Arlington, and that's when I got my black milk snakes. And then I drove home, got the keys to my apartment, and started the collection. So
crazy.
Very cool.
So even though pythons are the bulk of it today, colubrids have the honor of starting it. Is that
sure.
fair?
I mean, if you want to go all the way back,
the formal adult collection.
Yes, the formal collection today rides on the shoulders of black milk snakes, and probably more so rhino rat snakes. Yeah, nice. Absolutely.
Nice.
Yeah,
we'll take it. We'll take it.
Yeah.
Put that win for the colubrids.
So,
right.
Yeah, you've kept this diversity of snakes, and I have great respect for that, because that's kind of the model that I've done over the years. And I just like the whole, and Rob Stone, I think, talks about this, the whole, we're going to give something a try. And then if we like it, we keep it. And if we don't, it's okay to say this isn't for me and to move on. But then you learn something from each taxa as you grow. So we kind of, if you look at what you have currently, basically 10 years later from 2013, on the colubrid side anyway, there is this kind of theme, with the exception of the rhino rats, of arboreal, rear-fanged, colubroid. Is there something specific about that kind of ecology of this group that you're kind of drawn to, or is it like as simple as they look cool, or what is it about that kind of mix of characters that makes it so that's what the bulk of it? And even with the rhino rats, I mean, a lot of people don't realize it, but they produce peptides. And there is some evidence that they may actually have Duvernoy secretions, which is unlike any other rat snake in that group. So what is it just about this kind of arboreal aspect and all that does it for you?
It's a very good question, because really my snake keeping up until that point, when I think of keeping snakes, I think early on it was limited to the Burmese pythons, right? And so I was thinking, hey, I'm an experienced keeper because I keep these large, potentially dangerous animals. I keep them in a responsible manner and all that stuff. And so I said, hey, look at me, I do this. But then early in my travels, I volunteered at a crocodile farm in Queensland, and we had found a brown tree snake, right? Boiga regularis, and took it to the manager of the farm. It was in a cardboard box. And I was like, "Hey, there's a brown tree snake in here," and he just rips it open, and dumps it into his hand. And I'm like, "No, it's a brown tree snake. It's rear fanged. It's venomous." And he says, "Yeah, that's fine." And he just kind of forces it into his hand. And I had no concept of what of the dangers or the lack of dangers or I just didn't know, right? I didn't know what it was going to do. I didn't know how it was going to act. And so, looking at it from the perspective of a Burmese python, right? When a Burmese python gets in that S shape, right? You better look out, like it's about to strike. But that's just that's the natural shape of or resting position or of an arboreal snake, right? Is that S shape. So I felt like I was really, really attracted to that snake, and I thought I want to know more about that. I really want to know more about that. I thought it was so cool. And then I can remember cruising the king snake forums, and it was Bill Hughes, Vegas Billy, right? And he had a post on there talking about dogtooth cat snakes, and it was very rare to see them. I feel like you saw the Indonesian mangroves, the dendro, and the dendromelanata, cyanea, of course, to a lesser extent, some gymnocincta, but very rarely did you ever see pictures or any keepers that kept cynodon, especially in North America. In Europe, maybe you could get something, but he put a post up about Boiga cynodon, and he said they're essentially an 8-foot long Amazon tree boa that's tame. And that was just like, that's exactly what I want. That's exactly what I want. And from there, I never forgot that. And I knew that I wanted to keep those and experience those sometime in my life. And then there were other things that I think shaped my interest in that. I interned with the Kentucky Reptile Zoo with Jim Harrison and Kristen Wiley. My friendship with Taylor Tevis, he was working there at the time, and he and I became really, really good friends, and we would talk snakes. He's cleaning cobra cages, and while he's handling the cobras, I'm cleaning the cages, right? And we're just talking snakes, right? Like that was our job, and it just I kind of worked out to where it was like I knew I wanted to get these snakes, and rhino rat snakes was the ones. And I still had memories of them being on Pro Exotics price list for $1,200.
I remember that.
And I thought they were interesting, and I had never seen one. I don't think I had ever seen one before I had one. I received mine.
Cool.
Not personally. No, I've never seen one. So, and they didn't disappoint. Like it was just awesome. I mean, they're snakes in 3D, it's no longer a singular plane activity. It's 3D. And I really, really, really enjoyed that. And I guess I just keep gravitating towards that. And it's not all that. I mean, I got, the Sumatran pythons too, that I like too, but for sure the arboreal stuff is very, very attracted to me. Definitely.
No, very cool. Extremely cool. Yeah. I've dabbled with Boiga. I've kept, I can't say it. Sienna, the green guys. I've bred them, and dealt with the babies, which was fun. And then, obviously the Baron tracers and all that jazz. So it sounds like obviously rhino rats were the beginning with the arboreal colubrids for you. And then you kind of moved on to the Boiga. At what point do Baron's racers come into the equation?
So it was John at Black Pearl and Jeff Godbold's, Corrales Radio. He was on, so John was on Corrales Radio, and he was talking about them. And I had always hated on Baron's racers because I felt like they were the inferior rhino rat. They were the inferior horned snake.
That's like a common bickering point for those who keep either of those species. Yes.
Yeah. If Justin Smith's listening, Baron is better.
And so I said, like, what's the point? Like it just, the nose doesn't compare, right? Rhinos win, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like Cerastes, like Cerastes gasparetti is the better snake with the horns, on its head. Like, you're not going to argue that. Like, rhinos are just better. Well, anyway, through listening to this interview, John's talking about him. He's talking about, here's this snake that it eats pinkies right off the bat. It's it comes in different colors, and they get fairly large, right? And I thought, all right, well, I'll try them, right? And really, I think it was as much curiosity as it was like a market decision. Like, I saw like, okay, I think I could sell these, and I think they could be in demand. So I had just inquired of John if he had them for next year, and he said, actually, I have 3 right now. And I was like, oh, well, I mean, do I want them or do I not? So I said, okay, yeah, I'll take them. And so he shipped me a trio, and as soon as I opened them up, it was night and day. It was like, there's nothing about these that resemble a rhino rat snake. Like, they're a completely different animal. Rhino rat snakes are definitely more rat snakes, and Barron's racers are more racers. They're about as equivalent as, Colubrid constrictor to black rat snakes. It's just,
right.
They're just not the same. And I've really, really enjoyed them. They're fun to watch. They're pretty. They're a completely unnatural looking color, right? People are just really drawn to the blues. The blues are all that I have. And so that's been really, really cool. And then they've just been a dream to raise. I just had a clutch of, 15 out of 16, 8 pinkies just drop fed, frozen thawed pinkies drop fed overnight. And so they've been really, really good in that regard. But so that's kind of what got me into the Barons. I said, it doesn't have to be either or, you can be,
right.
You can like Twilight and Harry Potter. It's okay. Okay. It doesn't have to be either or.
Yes. I'm actually getting, I had rhinos. They didn't jive well with my room at the time. I gave my rhinos to Justin. So Justin's rhinos used to be my rhinos.
Right.
Or at least his original pair.
He's got some of mine, and he's got some of yours now.
There you go. Yeah. But I'm actually, remember how I talked about the false water currency? Guess who's getting an adult pair of rhinos next week?
There you go.
No, that's wrong. Guess who's getting a pair of adult rhinos tomorrow? Because that's where I am with Tinley time. So they're coming back in. Yeah. So no, you can keep them both. There's nothing wrong with keeping them both.
Well, see, and I'm sitting here thinking I need some Barons, and I think you just said, what, 17, 18, Terry? Is that what you said you just had?
Yeah, I had. Yeah.
Noted.
Yep. Noted,
Terry. Noted.
Okay. So I know you definitely have this experience with Boiga. So let's kind of head back to there. And there's a lot of listeners. We've had several episodes dedicated. We've had several listeners ask for Boiga because they definitely have. I've noticed that within herpetoculture, if you keep Boiga, you either dabble with a mangrove and you have like your obligate mangrove, or you're like all in. And so when it comes to Boiga, what is your general husbandry like? So like, what's the setup of the cage? Do you go big cage, naturalistic? Do you go rack? Like, what are they actually in? And if you could just kind of go over the cage, the furniture inside the cage, and then we'll get to temperatures and feeding and all that kind of jazz.
So I prefer larger cages with a lot of branches. I prefer that. That's how I have my Cynodon set up, and that's how I am going to have everything set up. My Cyanea are also set up that way in large cages with arboreal hides and a lot of climbing opportunities, and they use them, right? They definitely use them. My Melanata right now are in either 4-foot visions or in CB70 tubs. it's not going to be their end. That's not the end result. That's not where I want to keep them, because you can't see them. And when you pair a snake that's cannibalistic, right? I really, really want to see them. Okay.
Yeah.
And
that's
and
fair.
So, yeah. As well as, I mean, I can remember the very first time I ever saw a mangrove snake, right? Reptile Garden Snake Show. Like and I thought that's the most beautiful snake I've ever seen. Like they're super, super beautiful. But I have a love-hate relationship with them because I love them and they hate me, right? It's kind of how that goes. And but yeah, so that's how I keep them. And so what I'm thinking of now, I'm exploring new caging options and stuff. So I had built, just to take you back just shortly, 2021, I bought the house that I'm in now. If you've ever bought a house with a snake collection, my realtor, it's like my realtor is saying, what do you need? And it's like, well, okay, we need a fenced in yard. I got 2 kids. I'd like a garage or a place for the snakes. I'm sorry, the what? Okay. We have a collection, and then it's like, this is what we need, and so then they're just like, okay. And they're, so now they send me houses and they're like, hey, I think we could put the snakes over here. Do you think you could put the snakes over there? And I said, I think that'd be a great section, right? And so it became apparent that was really, and in 2021 was not a very fun time to look for a house. No. I mean, it was bonkers. And so it became apparent that, okay, maybe we just find a place that has a place for the snakes temporarily, like a garage, and then I'll build what I want, and I can build it how I want and all of that stuff. So that's essentially what we did. We bought the house in June, and then in September I started building this shed out. So it's 500 square feet, it's 3 different rooms, and the shed was part of it. And then it's like, okay, that's step 1. And then step 2 is going to be all the cages inside. So now this winter is kind of going to be the beginning of kind of how to do all that. So,
so you're building the actual enclosures that will be in the shed?
Well, you go back and forth between, you look at the caging that's out there, you think of what you want, and you can never find what you want.
Nothing's perfect. Yeah.
Nothing's perfect.
You like this, I like that, but none of it's got it all. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not dripping with free time, right? And so that lends to not build my own stuff, but at the same time, you don't want to spend the money for, commercial caging and then say, yeah, but it's not really what I want.
Yep.
So I'm still working on that. I'm still working through that. I haven't decided on a design that I want, but I know, for my dogtooth cat snakes, really those and the mangrove snakes, I'm thinking 8-foot cages, like 8 by 3 by 3.
Wow.
Because my dogtooth cat snakes are 10 feet long, right? Yeah. You put, I mean, that's 30 and I breed them in trios. So that's 30 feet of snake, and, so an 8-foot cage gets taken up pretty quickly. And just to see them, stretched out, and it's just, oh man, it's a whole nother level. So yeah.
Very cool.
But ideally that's how I do it. They do have fast metabolisms. I feed primarily a fowl avian diet. And so I think, that's another thing that I'm going to experiment with is different substrates and active substrates and things like that once we get there.
I just learned something. I didn't realize dogtooth snakes got that long. I didn't know they got that big. Wow.
That's very long cool. And skinny, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember seeing them. They were showing up in shows like 2016, 17, 18 here in the Pittsburgh area on the importer tables. And the thing that impressed me most is I distinctly remember I was at the show. There was what appeared to be a big one in like your kind of classic black bottomed clear deli that you'd see on an importer table, and somebody asked to get it out. And it was one of those like kind of Willy Wonka moments of the snake keeps coming, like, and it's like an 8.5-foot beast that came out of this 10-inch diameter cup, but it's just skinny, scrawny on top of each other kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, they're impressive animals.
Yeah.
I remember, now that you mentioned the shed, I do remember watching you building that on social media. Just real quick, because I know that there's people listening that are probably contemplating doing what you did. Was it the experience you thought it would be, building a snake shed?
I'm not sure what I thought it would be.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what I thought it would be. My wife asked me, right before we got the rafters up, she asked me, she said, what would you charge somebody to build this for them? And I said, I don't know. I'd really have to think about that. And 2 weeks later, I said, you couldn't pay me enough to build another one.
Yeah.
And that's the thing with construction projects, is every time I do one, I feel like I learn enough to what I would do differently the next time, but I also learn enough that I know I never want to do it again.
Yep.
I think. And so what I had done is I had taken shed plans and expanded them. So my building is 14 by 36. There's an 18-foot main room, and then a 10-foot cool room, and then an 8-foot quarantine room. And all of them have mini splits in them, completely on their own zones. And so it's an epoxy floor, like you'd put like on a garages, right? It's like that epoxy floor, foam insulation. And I think I went over budget by maybe 300%. And, it just, but part of that was I took shed plans and I expanded them. So like my soffit underneath my eaves is all tongue and groove pine, which it didn't like. So I spent thousands of dollars on my soffit instead of spending, I could have spent hundreds of dollars, or tens of dollars on my soffit, but I didn't realize the scale of what I was doing until I was at the cash register, and they're like, well, that'll be $1,200. And I was like, well, why? And they're like, cause you got 10 boards, $12,
Yeah.
And at the time I thought, okay, this is more than just a construction project. Like this is an art project, and I want to do something that I'm proud of, and it's on our property. And so I am proud of it. But there are some times that I wish I had more money in my savings account because of it.
You describing that, I'm like, I know I could never do that. What I've learned about myself when it comes to any kind of construction type project, I can give it my all. I can be incredibly meticulous. I can give full attention and, have no problem with it as long as it gets done that day. When it takes longer than a day, I start getting frustrated. I don't like walking away when something's not completed yet. Now, I know there's going to, like, if any of my employees hear that, they're going to think, you leave shit undone all the time, laying around this store. But that's the thing, is when it comes to building something, man, if it's not done in a day, I'm irritable with it. Man, I salute you, my friend.
Yeah. I tell you, really, my dad was a journeyman carpenter. He taught me a lot. And like I said, in 8th grade, we built that shed together. But I was never the one coming up with an idea. I was never one saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. He'd say, this is what we're going to do. And then, okay, well, I'll screw this together and I'll cut where he tells me to cut. But being, the general manager of the whole project, so to speak, was, it was interesting, but it was also, it was really encouraging. Man, you can learn just about anything you want on YouTube. And I did, there were a lot of times that's what I did. So, I highly recommend thinking about it for anybody that's thinking about that. I'll tell you this, it is 100% better than my garage. It's 100% better than any spare bedroom that I ever had. I have water in my room. It's all, the temperatures that I want it, and it's snake proof. Yeah. And that in and of itself is so great. Like stuff happens, right? Like snakes, like a snake gets out, and now I don't think, oh, am I going to find it? I just went, well, I know I'm going to find it. It's in this room. Like I will find it. It's in this room. And, so that's, and I have my friends who are really gracious, and they'll remind me sometimes of, hey, you need to look at where you came from. Like, like you did build something that you can be proud of. And that's, man. I really appreciate that.
No, as someone who's right-handed, but when he tries to build anything, he has 2 left hands. I have nothing but respect. I distinctly remember watching the videos you'd put up and everything, and think, he's just better than me. There's no way I can ever do this. So anyway, okay. Well, back to the snakes. So with the enclosures, do you ever do the live plant thing, or is it just sticks and you know, the cage furniture is more branches and things of that nature?
So for what I've used in my sign-on enclosure specifically is I used I didn't do live plants. So I did some fake plants that I tied to the sticks, right? And I feel like when we think, hey, you know, get a cage and put a stick in there, right? It's like a pretty big diameter stick, right? Like an inch, you know, half an inch, 2 inches, you know, maybe there'll be some forks in it, you know, but that's not what I have at all. Mine they're very thin branches, and it's kind of a cluster. So there's several highways and stuff. And I find that snakes would rather have many points of contact on many different small branches than to just hang out on one big branch. You know, bigger branches can support bigger animals, and bigger animals eat snakes, right? So it just kind of makes sense that they would use that ability. Yeah, they would use that ability to spread out. And I learned that from that scrub python I had. I let it go in a tree in my yard, thinking, well, it'll come back down. I'll just spray it with a hose when I want it to come back down, and it'll come back down. And worst case scenario, if it doesn't come back down, I can climb the tree. And so it climbs to the top, like the middle of the tree, and then out to the furthest branches, and then coils up and stays there. And then when I'm ready to get it down, I spray it, and it just starts drinking. And it never came down. So when I had that scrub python, I got very good at climbing trees, but it taught me that it's not the larger diameter branches that it necessarily wants. So I've used fake plants. I did that more for a visual barrier as I was, you know, first getting them in the, you know, Terry 2.0. I really want to explore live plants some more. I've raised babies in enclosures with live plants, and far and away their sheds, their activity, like everything is way better. So I'm convinced that there's a benefit there, and I want to do more of that. So it's definitely something that I'm going to explore more in the next iteration of what I'm doing.
Very, very cool.
That's very interesting. I mean, that is neat. So you say their shedding is better. What other, just overall pieces do you see that kind of, I'll say, increase with the babies whenever you have this?
So take this. So the first clutch of dogtooth cat snakes I separated up into tubs, right? So I had them all separately in like V18 tubs, water bowl hide, very, very, I don't even want to say humid, but wet, right? I assume it was humid, but I know that it was wet. But we know that the ventilation was terrible, and they had terrible sheds, routinely had terrible sheds. So another clutch I put them all in a 3x2x2 with pothos plants and a bunch of sticks and a bunch of cork tube hides, and I would fog them every night, every other night, and never once had an issue with shedding. They all started eating faster than the ones in tubs. Like I was just convinced, like, this is the way to do it. And so the latest clutch that I just hatched, that's what they're in Exoterra terrarium I went and got a big pothos plant, stuck it in there, and cork tubes. And so the entire clutch of, 13 snakes is in there. And as they're out, I just, feed them as I see them. And that's kind of how I do it. So as they get bigger, as they grow out, like if one is significantly bigger than another, then I'll pull that one out and put it into a different enclosure. But that is what I have seen. And even with the rhino rat snakes, I did that one time where I put an entire clutch in one cage to see how they reacted. And it's hard to keep track of them, right? It's hard to see which ones have eaten and which ones haven't, but they certainly seem to do really well in that environment.
That's really, really neat. And especially you said pothos, and that's when it comes to like bioactives, or if you're putting a plant in a cage with a reptile, that is like the plant to utilize. They're cheap. They grow like crazy. They're very easy to take care of, and it seems like anything that I've got that in here at the shop, they're doing fine. It's doing fine. I mean, it just seems to be like the perfect greenery to put in with anything. So just neat that you've seen that just better result all the way around with those species of snakes. So sorry, you caught my attention with that for sure. Yeah. So I wanted to dive into that a little deeper.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's more that we can learn there. I don't know if it's, I think there's probably something with transpiration. There's something with micro habitat, right? They can get in among the roots and the dirt, and, the dirt's going to be moist and all that. There's definitely something there that with live plants is not present there with fake plants, so.
Very cool.
Very neat. Very, very neat.
I have here in my office at work, this wall is all snakes, and I'm looking right now, and there are 6 smaller vivs, and 5 of them have a pothos plant in them. And I put the pothos in May, and some of them, it's you think I have a pothos plant in a box, and you don't know there's a snake in there. Completely taken over, but it's really cool. All my kings will actually use the ground foliage of the pothos, and I see them kind of basking in coils by the heating lamps and everything, the exact way that I'll see them when they're out in the field, which is really cool.
That's cool.
So it's always nice to have that effect. It's pretty interesting. Roy Blodgett does the same thing with Spilotes sulphureus when he's rearing them, which is they hatch.
Keep them all together.
Yeah, he keeps them in 18 by 18 exos with a pothos plant in cork bark. So there's another guy doing pretty much same thing with big arboreal colubrid. So that's maybe there's something to that. Maybe that's what I need to do with my bear and eye babies, which we're going to say bear and eye for 1 second. So lighting. What do you do for lighting with these animals? Do you have any kind of in-cage lighting specific to them, or is it ambient lighting from the room or a basking spot, or what do you do on that front?
So I've given them belly heat before. So lighting, I've had T5 fluorescent lighting on them. Version 2.0, I think I really want to go deep into lighting. I really want to do UV on everything for my animals that have hot spots, especially the pythons and the boas. I want to do the deep heat and all the different wavelengths that we're learning more and more about, right?
Oh yeah.
I really want to provide all that. I want to see what it does. And I think that'll be really, really interesting. Up until now, the lighting has really just been for my benefit so that I could see them. I think it looks cooler. So I've just used LEDs and T5s. Of course, if you have plants in there, my cages that have plants, I did Jungle Dawn LEDs and have used those. But for right now, everything is pretty much just on ambient light. So my room lights are on timers. They come on every day and then turn off every day. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So we talked a little bit about feeding, but just for people that want to get into the Boiga, can you talk a little bit, a bit about, like, you have a neonate Cynodon versus Hyena. What are you going to be feeding that? And then as they mature all the way up through adulthood, and then do you prefer a fowl diet or a mouse diet, or what is your approach to feeding Boiga specifically?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm leaning more and more towards fowl. I think we all know that these tiny snakes are not going to encounter, baby mice in the wild, right? And if they did, they would also be encountering mama mouse, which would quickly make a meal out of whatever snake's going to eat them, right? And this isn't an argument of, well, they're not going to get that in the wild, right? Because they're probably not going to get the chickens that we're offering in the wild either. But we're just trying to get something closer, right? So I want to feed snakes what they want to eat. And if you give, I've seen this across several different species, if you present a mouse, let's start with a chick. Like if you present a chick, they will inspect it with curiosity, or ambivalence, right?
Yes.
Like you might as well put a stick in its face, right? And then if you put a rodent in front of it, it will have a strong reaction, either in aggression, defense, or escape. That's kind of what I've seen. So there's something there, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that birds would be, especially if you're thinking of like songbirds or nesting birds, birds that snakes would be nest raiding or something. I think those are going to be seed eaters or insectivores, right? They're not going to be carnivores. They're not going to attack a snake as prey, and so there's less of a chance of injury, right? So I'm leaning towards a more avian prey. So to answer your question, when I first got signed on, my first babies I ever got from Jordan Russell, is very gracious to me, but I killed him by feeding him rat tails and fuzzy mice. So I was force feeding him rat tails and fuzzy mice, killed him. I told him about him, and he says, yeah, you can't do that. Graciously let me try again. And I had sparrow cages, I had bird cages in my backyard. I went out to get some feathers to scent a mouse, and there were eggs in the bird cage. So I was like, well, these are really tiny eggs. Like, let me just take one. So I took one, put it in a two ounce cup, right? And I put it in the cage. And within 5 minutes, that snake went up to the egg, consumed it in front of me. I went back out, got the other 4 eggs out of the nest, put them in the deli cup, and that snake ate all 4 eggs in front of me, right? Had never eaten a meal on its own ever, just gobbled up these 4 birds' eggs. And I thought, okay, there's something there. So I started making bird cages. I put them all over my yard.
Yes.
And so, but unfortunately, the birds, winter came, the birds stopped laying eggs. I went back to assist feeding / force feeding, and I ended up killing those snakes too. And I said, I don't know. I don't think I can do this. Then I got the adults that I have now. I had success breeding those. So when I had those babies, I'd learned from a guy on Facebook, he used pieces of frog meat. So he'd get frog legs and he'd slice off slivers of this frog meat and he'd assist feed them that way. And they would take it they would take it. It'd be fine. It's still assist feeding, right? It's not force feeding. I don't push anything past a dog-tooth cat snake's jaws. I won't ever do it for the rest of my life. I don't think that they can handle it. But that worked, and then I could start doing that, and then chase it with a pinky mouse, right? The only problem with that is it's very, very time consuming. I'm sitting there holding a snake. I'm doing that. I'm waiting for it to eat, and then I'm doing all that. And then it's not very cheap, and it's just, I don't know. It was hard to scale. So then in later clutches, I thought, okay, they like eggs. Hognose snakes eat hard-boiled eggs. Let me see if they'll eat a hard-boiled egg. So I had hard-boiled eggs, and I'd cut those into pieces, and I'd just put those in their mouth. They'll eat a hard-boiled egg. They won't eat it off a tray, right? So I've cut them up and just left them in the cage, and they won't eat them that way. But if you put it in their mouth, they'll swallow it. And I was like, okay, well, that's pretty cheap, food source. I feel like it's protein, right? It's got to be better than a pinky mouse, and it's, you can shape it however you want. So it's easy to swallow. So I spent a year doing that, and I would feed them that until they got big enough to take day-old quail. And then I would feed them day-old quail. Then I've also started them. Then I had another clutch, and I just started them off a day-old quail at the very beginning. And some of them took them, and then some of them took them and also died. Right? Like it was just too big of a meal. Huh. So enter Jason Hood, who's been raising button quail, and I've really wanted. I'd gotten button quail before, and I'd gotten button quail eggs and hatched them, and used those for feeders with some stuff that I was using, and so I really wanted to try them. So I got some button quail chicks, which, if anybody's listening, button quail and Coturnix quail are different species altogether. I feel like some people think I mentioned button quail and they say, oh yeah, okay, I'll get those from this, bulk rodent supplier or whatever. They've got quail, I'll get button quail from them. It's like, no, those are day-old Coturnix quail. It's a Japanese quail. It's the quail that's raised for meat. It's about 2/3 larger than a button quail. Button quail, nobody raises them for meat. You'd be wasting your time because they're very, very small. But they hatch out about the size of, let's say, a fuzzy mouse. And so I got some of these frozen from Jason, and the first thing I tried them on was my diamond pythons. And I fed I fed 16 diamond pythons and 15 ate off of tongs. These button quail.
Wow.
The very first feedings. Second feeding, same. Third feeding, same. Fourth feeding, I got them on mice. So it was like, wow, okay, I want to try these with my Boiga too. So this latest clutch of Cynodon, the dogtooth cat snakes, I've got them in the terrarium, right? So I had some up, and I tried to thawed some out, took them on tongs, put them in front of them, and they ate them. And they're the perfect size. I'm not handling the snake. I'm not stressing it out. I'm not having to assist feed it. So I'm really, really leaning into that. I really, really enjoy that. So that's kind of my so this weekend, my kids and I, we went to this farm and we bought button quail. So
nice.
we're now raising button quail, and I'm pretty excited about that. And Cyanea, I've never had baby Cyanea. I've gotten juveniles from Justin that were already established on mice, and my understanding is that, and you can tell me your experience, Zach, but my understanding is that they start. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I don't
They're
want
horrible.
your experience to go. Okay. Okay.
I don't have nice things to say.
All right. And
no.
so we'll see. We'll see if button quail are a good example there. The other thing that I want to do is start raising zebra finches.
Yes.
I want to start raising zebra finches for their eggs, because every single egg that was of appropriate size, all the way up to the adults, they devour eggs. And I think it makes sense. I mean, an egg is the perfect food source, right? It's easy to swallow for the most part, and it's not going to fight back. And and so and usually it's buy one get 4 free. So if you found one, you usually have a lot of them. So I want to start raising zebra finches as well as the button quail. Really kind of expand that for getting these started. But that's what I've been doing with the dogtooth cat snakes, feeding them until they can take day-old, Coturnix quail, feeding them quail until they can take chicks, and then just feeding them chicks for the rest of their life. My adults will take, I get larger chickens for them, and they can eat them fine. I'll put chicken eggs just that I get at the grocery store in the cage. They'll eat those, which is, especially for like breeding season and stuff, it's really cool, especially when you're cohabiting snakes, right? You have multiple snakes in one enclosure, to be able to have food in there at lib where they can eat as much as they want whenever they want. And there's no fear of, okay, well, what if they're both eating the same thing and they eat each other, right? So that's been really good. And they've really liked I have one female. I put in 4 eggs and she ate all 4. And I was like, okay, great. She's full. I put in 3 more eggs and come back the next day and she ate those 3 eggs too. So,
oh my God,
she was looking pretty full, but yeah,
no, I love this. I think, so I have my grad student pay, and we're working with Orion Center for Indigo Conservation at Central Florida Zoo and making a sausage diet for indigos that has a nutritional profile of a snake, but isn't a snake. And it's not because we don't want to feed them snakes. It's just completely unrealistic to have a colony of feeder corn snakes for 8-foot indigo snakes. Like, that's insane to think about. But it is possible to do like a Reptilinks thing and make a sausage diet that's equivalent to them. And so that's kind of introduced me to the world of nutrition. And my background is ecology. Like, I am not a nutritionist at all. I'm not a physiologist at all. That's not where my background is. But I keep getting pulled there now with this herpetoculture stuff. And it's absolutely fast. Like, I didn't realize what I was missing. But the nutritional stuff, every time I talk with the veterinarian that we're working with at the zoo, who's an amazing guy. We may get him on here one day, Dr. Bogan. And then we're working with another biologist and veterinarian who's a nutritionist. But when they talk, it's one thing to talk about the difference between a mouse and a rat and a chick with people in the hobby side of herpetoculture. It's another to talk to people who like, this is their thing.
Yeah.
And and they don't have a dog in the fight. They're just, it's just science. And both Bogan and Dr. Ihlenfeld is the other individual. They both flat out said for snakes, birds are definitely the more complete diet. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I realized, so, here I'm hearing this, and we all know what happened with rodent prices over the past 3 years. Yes, inflation hit the rats.
Yes, we do.
That's for damn sure. And we found a chicken farm in New York who will sell us day-old chicks for 14 cents. Yeah. And so, a 90-cent adult mouse or a day-old chick, which I've had 2 veterinarians tell me is a better diet, for 14 cents.
Yeah.
So today we got our order of 500 chicks in, and that's 500 flipping chicks. Yeah. And I know it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $300 to $400. I mean, you just, no, sorry, I can't do math. It was more like $200 to $300. So anywho, but no, I love the idea of the zebra finches. When I was in college, I had a corn snake that wouldn't eat, and I was talking to someone about this, and he said, you got to feed it a bird. And I was like, okay. And this was brutal, but I was like, I'm going to go and buy a parakeet. So I went to the store and I bought a budgie, and I walked through the door with the bird, and my mom had a rule, like, no birds. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to sneak in the house like I did a million times before with whatever other animal I was sneaking. And she caught me like red-handed. And she's like, you're getting into birds now? And I was like, hopefully this bird is here for the next 10 minutes. And she knew what that meant. And nothing against parakeets. I respect parakeets. But I will tell you something. That corn snake went on a 4-month hunger strike, which was the weirdest thing to see a corn snake do that. The second the budgie hit the cage, the hunger strike was done. Like, that thing came rocketing out, constricted it immediately, and then it ate for the next 8 years I had it. Mm-hmm. So I don't think we use birds anywhere near enough in the diet of these animals.
I 100% agree. What I love about this is, when we're talking about the nutritional value, it's, for me, what I think so neat is when we just, like what he was saying is, it just makes sense on their behaviors, out in the wild of course, that would be a more common meal, and a more, especially for the small ones. That's the thing that to me is just so neat, is when we just stop and think of, okay, why won't this snake eat? All right, in the wild, what would it be doing? What would it be encountering? What would, and making that shift? So I think, the eggs, plucked right out of the nest there. And hearing them gobble down, that's spot on, and that's really the direction that when we're working with, whether it's something that is unique and uncommon or a corn snake that's not eating for months, if we apply that same principle, what would they be doing in the wild? What would they be encountering? There we go. And it's, we solve problems. It's, we talk a lot about if the snake won't eat, it doesn't make it, and there's truth to that in some lines, but it's also, where we need to ask ourselves, we shouldn't have to force something down its throat. Have we tried what it wants? Have we tried what it would be eating in the wild? So, another great piece here, gentlemen.
Even when I was keeping Burmese pythons, my male at the time, he went on a strike, and then I got some, raw chicken breast at the store, and I threw that in there, and he ate it out of the air. He grabbed it before it hit the ground, and it's like, my goodness, I've wiggled so many rats and rabbits and hamsters and everything, and it didn't want anything. And then there's something about that avian prey that, boy, it can really, really, turn them on, and it really is rewarding when you give a snake what it wants, You know, like rhino rat snakes. When I was first doing rhino rat snakes, man, it was just assumed, right? It's still somewhat assumed. It's getting less and less, but it was just assumed that you assist feed rhino rat snakes pinky heads, you know, maybe for the 9 months, you know, I mean, you assist feed them until they'll take a regular pinky. And I had heard people using fish, and I thought, well, man, fish will die in a water bowl so fast. I'll see if I can get some tadpoles. So I got some tadpoles and stuck them in the water bowl, and I saw this snake that would it's like this little shoestring that's not going to eat anything ever, became an absolute monster predator against tadpoles. You know, and it just devoured them. It was so cool to see that transition, see that click in them. So also with my bear and I've seen better success with avian prey. With my mangrove snakes, I feed them primarily rodents. I'm starting to switch that over as I talk to more and more breeders about switching it. So Ashley, actually, I was listening to something that she did recently, and I think I'll start switching them more over to bird prey as well. So, but yeah, I mean, even prices alone this summer, I got more quail because it was cheaper than rats of the similar weight, you know? Yeah.
No, it just seems like a very natural progression. I loaded my freezers up with rodents about 2 months ago, and then we found this chick distributor, and I'm waiting for my guys to go down for brumation to get my personal cooler down. But I know that next spring, when the first kind of hit to the freezer to fill it back up again, it's going to be chicks a lot. And the way it works, because I actually talked to the farmers, and it makes sense, is that they need, if you're working with an egg farm, they don't need males, and they still need to hatch out lots of chickens because they can get eggs and chicken breast out of the same bird, so it's more economic for them. So the males really sucks to be a male chicken on the chicken farm. They basically get sexed immediately and put in a bucket, and then they're CO2'd and flash frozen. And the thing that I found really interesting, at least with this chicken farm, they were in New York that I was working with, is they were completely baffled that people wanted to buy these things. It's like you haven't looked outside your like poultry farm for humans much, because you know there's a lot of things that'll eat a chick beyond a snake. So they were just
that could have been a missed opportunity there. That could have been a missed opportunity. You could have said, "Hey, look, I'll take those off your hands.
I'll take all of them
for a small fee." Right?
See, that's the nerdy scientist in me. I don't do business at all. So, anyway, okay. So, if you don't mind, I'd like to segue a little bit onto breeding. With this, you know, we've kind of made it Cyanodon specific tonight for the most part. What is the process in breeding them? Do you have to do any kind of cycling, or is it they're asynchronous breeders and you can pretty much get eggs any time of year, or how do you go about that?
I have found with the Cyanodon and the Cyanea, so the green cat snakes and the dogtooth cat snakes, that if they're fed enough, they'll go, right? Just feed them a lot, pair them, you're going to get eggs. And if you get eggs once, you're almost guaranteed to get eggs twice. I've gotten 4 clutches without pairing a male in a row, and I was trying to turn my female off. Like I was trying to turn her off. I wasn't feeding her as much. The temperatures were a little bit lower, and she'd lay another clutch, and they'd be infertile, you know, but she'd lay them. I'm like, well, my goodness, I guess if she's going to lay, I might as well, you know, feed her. So now I try to, you know, feed them more, and you can't. I've never seen an overweight boiga, right? I've never seen a fat one. I have a very, very large melanata, but I wouldn't say she's fat in no way is she fat. And the Cyanea and the Cyanodon, same thing. Like you're never ever going to overfeed those. And if you do, I'd really, really like to see it. But they produce a lot. They're very prolific. Like I said, I've had 4 clutches of Cyanodon eggs within 12 months, and without pairing the male. So with those 2 species in particular, and so Justin really talked me through the cyanea, and just feeding them a lot. Of course, you can palpate for follicles. If I ever palpate and feel follicles, I'll throw the male in there. And but what I am still trying to figure out is the mangrove snakes. I think the mangrove snakes, I've talked to people and they've said same thing: food cycling them, and then paring down during a storm event.
Yep.
Like a drop in barometric pressure. I think it makes sense to do that. I've heard of people cooling them down. I've read a lot of literature. There's a lot of PDFs you can get, Google Scholar, that's printed on Guangjiensis and Dendrophilus, or the mangrove snakes, and even the cyanea. And some of them reference a cool down event in the winter. I don't think that's necessary. I know that's not necessary for the green cat-eyed snakes or the dogtooth cat snakes. Like I said, I'm still trying to unlock my mangrove snakes, but mine laid eggs in the middle of winter, so it wasn't, it wasn't necessarily, and afterwards. So in the middle of winter and in summer, so they double clutched as well. So
interesting.
I'm more of the thought that they can go any time of year. But they do seem to respond well to a food cycling event. Feed them a whole bunch, wait for it to rain, and throw them in.
Yep. That's basically what I did with my green cat-eyed snakes. I did do a little bit of temperature cycling, but it wasn't like I wouldn't call it a full blown brumation. All that I did, I had them set up in vivs in my office at home, which is kind of the equivalent to if I had a warm room. That would be it. The snakes are also out in the garage. In the garage, I just let her rip. It's perfect. It gets down into the mid 50s, low 50s for brumation purposes. But I just turned the lights off in them. But there were still plenty of lights in the room because of all the other enclosures. So there was some ambient light, and we had a couple blizzards rolling through in late February, and it was funny because I was breeding my popwin carpets and my cat-eyed snakes, the exact same weather front. And I thought, what the hell? Yeah. And they both, as soon as I introduced the male, there was no, it was an immediate, all right, we're doing this kind of thing, which was cool. Yeah. So just something slightly different, but with the babies, with the cat-eyed snakes, I don't know if Justin talked to you about this, but Justin, and I got a pair from Jordan Russell as well. But the kind of general consensus with them, and it may have changed since this was 4 or 5 years ago. No, 3 years ago, because this was 2020 when I bred them, was that you basically you offer pinks, you offer frog-scented pinks, you offer bird-scented pinks, but they're so damn small when they come out that the only kind of prey item readily available is a tail. And so you just basically mouse tail them until they get a little bit of size. And it's almost like once they get the size to eat the pinky, they then eat the pinky. But I don't when mine came out, I distinctly remember looking at them and being like, if you actually could swallow this pinky, I'm pretty sure your throat's going to explode because it was so tiny. But I know better. I know that, there's a lot of elastic tissue in there, and I'm certain that it probably could have. But I got a trio from Jordan Russell, and that trio was a pain. I think the shipping process stressed them out a lot. The clutch that we raised here at the school, they converted from the tails to the pinkies much faster. I definitely remember, and I definitely attribute that to the fact that they never went through that crazy shipping process, which has to be about the closest thing to an alien abduction an animal can experience. Yeah. But no. Well, and you said you have Cyanea eggs in the incubator right now?
I do. Yeah.
Correct?
I believe they're on about day 95 or so. So maybe
what
in
temp
about
do you incubate at?
Room. So, and I'm sorry for how, ambivalent that is, but
no.
But they're on the they're on top of the cages that I breed them in my warm room. For the most part, that's about 82 degrees. I have incubated them in a completely controlled setting. Chris, if you're into Boiga, you know this Chris guy in the Netherlands. He's absolutely phenomenal keeper and breeder. I've tried to get him on a podcast, and he doesn't show it online at all, but he's not confident in his English to do an interview. And I said, dude, you can do it in Dutch, man. I'll find some way to translate it. Like, people need to know, and, but he's such a great resource. And, he said, I believe what he would do is, 84, in the daytime. And then he would provide a night drop to, I believe, about 78. And he would do that. So I've done that in an incubator in my house and had success. One thing I will say with the incubation, so the first clutch of Dog to the Cat snakes I had, I set them up on like floating perlite, right? So egg crate on top of perlite, full of water. So basically the sim method. And they didn't hatch. In fact, they got too dry, and it I had just shocked that they did that. And by the time I realized they were so dry, I already had another clutch. And so I went back to that clutch and I covered them in damp sphagnum moss. And I said, if these eggs fail, they're going to fail because they got too wet. I'm not going to make the same mistake twice. And so I put more water than I ever would have recommended in these, and sort of buried them in this damp sphagnum moss, and they hatched after 104 days. Wow. So now what I do for my Boiga is I'll mix up vermiculite and sphagnum moss in a slightly more moist than normal consistency, and then I'll bury the eggs in the moss. So I'll kind of make a nest, put the eggs in it, and then put the moss over it. And then, a nod to the ball python breeders out there, I'll put that press and seal, that Glad Ziploc press and seal over the box, so it's completely sealed. And I've had good success with that. So
crazy.
I've heard of some bursting, like they absorb too much water and they burst. I don't know why I don't have that problem, other than perhaps being in the moss, or they don't have direct contact with enough moisture to get to that point to where they burst. But I've never had an egg burst. And the other thing is, it's always shocking that they hatch on their own, because these snakes are the weakest snakes you've ever seen in your life. And these eggshells are the thickest eggshells you've ever seen in your life. And they hatch on their own. Yeah.
So that was going to actually be one of my questions. Have you ever had any issues with like fully formed dead in egg babies?
So my Melanata egg this year, I had one fertile egg, and on day 125, I thought, you know what, I'm going to cut this thing open. It had started leaking probably around maybe in the day 80 or 90, it started leaking. Of course, that grew mold, which grew a larger growth. So it had this growth on the egg that was equal to the size of the egg, but the egg looked fine. And so I thought, well, it'll be fine. On day 125, I was like, it's either dead in the egg or it was dead a long time ago, or I don't know. Let's find out. So I cut the growth off. I cut the whole top of the egg off. All I can see is yolk. And but I saw blood vessels, which was really confusing to me. So I was like, you don't expect to see blood vessels on an infertile egg or on an egg that's dead. And, but all I could see was yolk, because there's no snake in there. And I thought, well, I don't know. And so I turned the egg over, I dumped it out, and the snake was on the bottom. And I was freaked out, So I scooped it back up, put it back in the egg, and I put it in the nest box, and I put the press and seal over, so no flies could get in there or anything. And the next day it was on top of the yolk, and the next day it was out, and it was fine. Now that snake didn't survive, but I don't know, it was kind of fascinating. So I have had, what?
The fact that you could cut it open and do all that and it lived, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. It lived for about a month. It was very, very small, and its head seemed to me to be slightly deformed, almost like it had like a cone head on it. So I think there was something physiologically wrong with it, but we'll see. I have more Melanata eggs in the incubator right now, so we'll see kind of how that goes. I have had some Cynodon babies fully formed die, but they were on the bottom of the egg mass, and so I just attribute that to they weren't able to hatch. And I think about that sometimes. I think if they were going to pip and they didn't pip into open air, but pipped into another egg, that's twice the thickness that they would have to go through in order to hatch, right? And then they'd have to go into an egg and then out, find the hole or whatever. And so it makes me wonder if maybe they just, luck of the draw, they guessed the wrong spot to pip and end up drowning or something. But
I asked that because that's one of the kind of battles I've had with Persinum, with greenbush rats, where I've had fully formed dead in egg babies, and after cutting the eggs, they'll be on top. They will be, and so I keep wondering, okay, is there something where humidity is too low, too high, causing thickness of the shell to be a problem for them to get through? Lowering temperatures did help. I started getting higher hatch rate, but just with everything you were saying you were doing with from one extreme to the other with the humidity, and the fact that you are incubating at room temp, which is exactly what I'm doing as well. But my temp is a little bit lower. I'd say closer to about the 76 mark. And so I just wanted to see if, you were experiencing any of that at any point, because then I start wondering, is it an oxygen thing where, I'm holding humidity? Do I not have enough oxygen getting in towards the end, of the incubation period, whenever that egg would be absorbing a little bit more oxygen? So we're just curious on your thoughts there.
Yeah. Are you feeding them rodents?
Yes, primarily.
So there has been a thought in some circles that a rodent diet is too high in calcium, and this is where your nutrition, I think, will really come into play here. Are rodents really higher in calcium than avian prey? But I have heard people say, "Hey, we fed a primarily rodent diet, and the snakes weren't hatching." And this is popular in Boiga. If you read the articles published online, and these are very old, some of them from the 70s and 80s, they do talk about the thickness of the shell, and they attributed it to hard water. They thought, well, maybe you needed to use rainwater or distilled water or soft water. But this is when they were incubating in sand in a Ziploc bag, or something like that. And so maybe that's a thing. As far as the oxygen exchange, I feel like that's less of an issue than we think it is. And I could be wrong, but the only reason I think that is ball python breeders use this press and seal, right, on their egg boxes, and they don't open it at all until, so for 55 days, it's completely sealed, and ball pythons will hatch just fine, right? And I've witnessed that. And however, it's interesting too that in that same example, condensation will form on that press and seal, and it'll drip on the eggs, and so these eggs are wet, and they still hatch. Now, we all you do that with a Woma egg or a blackhead egg or a chondro egg. You can do that with a lot of other eggs, and you just you look at them wrong, and it's going to be too much humidity, and they're going to go wrong. So it's strange to me. I think egg, I don't know, is that egg ecology or the egg science there of why are some eggs more susceptible to this and some are not? And it makes sense to me. I understand why a Woma egg would be more prone to adapt to a drier condition, right? And where a ball python egg that's maybe it's pretty humid. I assume my understanding is it's pretty humid in these rodent burrows or whatever that's living in, that it's able to take that, right? So, but I don't know if that's the case. I try to mitigate that by about once a month early on. I'll open my tubs up, and then
same thing.
as it gets closer to hatching, I'll open them up more frequently, so maybe once a week, and then, but it seems like you're on the right track with lowering the temperature and all that. Yeah.
That's really interesting stuff. I haven't had any of this happen yet, so I'm just sitting back listening. So when it does happen to me, I at least know what the hell may be going on.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a punch. Whenever you're cutting open an egg that should have been gone, and it's just turns out that it was just a dud to begin with. It just looked good, for a while. Yeah. That's one thing. But man, when it was a fully formed baby, it's just digging in deeper. So that's heartbreaking.
I had a rough scale python clutch that there was like 4 or 5 fully formed dead in the egg, and it just makes you wonder, like, it's just like, why, so I don't know.
Yep.
I don't know. And then if you look at maternal incubation, you think, oh, okay, well, eggs are fragile, right? Like I must have done something or whatever. Have a python maternally incubate an egg and then say eggs are fragile. Like they look like garbage, right? Like things will leave them and come back, and they hatch. So it's not a fragility issue. It's something else, and we're getting better at it, but there's still a lot to learn.
Well, we're running down with time, and I don't want to keep you too much later because it's kind of late for us on the Eastern time zone. But since we're talking about eggs, you did say that you've hatched Baroni. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Have you done like a single clutch or multiple clutches, or where are you on that front?
I had, let's see, what year is it? It's 23, 22, 21. I had 3 clutches in 2021. Only 1 fertile egg last year. This year, I had 3 clutches. I had 3 good clutches and 2 or 3 clutches that slugged out.
Gotcha. So do you incubate them the same way as you do the Boiga, or are they a different can of worms?
Yeah, same. Okay. The egg box are right next to each other, right on top of the cages. Yep.
Do they, at that temperature, do they last as long before hatching as Boiga, or the Boiga? Because
they're a lot faster.
Okay, they're in like the 70 to 80 day range at those lower temperatures. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And then, now I've literally written the book on Phylodryas, right? And I was at Tinley, and 2 things happened at Tinley with Phylodryas, which I found rather interesting. First, when you write a book that has a Baroni chapter in it, everybody that's gotten bitten by a Baroni and had their hand blow up shows you pictures of their hands, which I saw so many inflated hand pics on Saturday from people being bit by Baroni. So I'm going to say this now, and we'll have more Baroni episodes, but every time we have a Baroni episode, be careful with them. That you got to work to get bitten, but if you've got quail scent or mouse scent on your hands, and if you've worked with these snakes, they got a strong feeding response. Yeah. Everybody that had been bitten because of a feeding issue. The snake went over the tongs, bit him on the hand, or one guy was feeding them with his hand, which was really hard for me not to tell my feelings about that. And I'm sure, like you said, I look like the gorilla in the zoo. Pretty sure that I had that expression on my face when he was showing me the picture of his hand. But when I hatch, we have one female here at the university that produces, another female here at the school she's a beautiful animal. She's a giant. She's the biggest Baroni I've ever seen. She's 7.5 feet of pure Baroni. Wow. We can't get a clutch out of her to save our lives. But I don't know if it's the pairing. I don't know if it's my female. I don't know if it's us. But we have had a hell of a time getting the baby Baroni to eat right off the bat. But it seems like Baroni keepers, it's the same thing as tricolor hognose snake keepers. You either get babies that just eat, or you get babies that you got to do a lot of tricks. And I had to do a lot of tricks. So when you said early on that you just drop fed them and they went, I would like to, and I know it may be that simple, I would like to explore that a little bit. Or maybe
he's like, not calling you a liar. I kind of want you to prove this.
I just want to know what you're doing that I'm not doing, because Holy shit. So,
Yeah.
so is it just literally, are they kept singly or are they kept together? Are you doing
I
that
keep them.
ecto
Yeah.
thing that we talked about? Like,
No,
what's your
no,
strategy there?
So I keep them singly. So I keep them all together until they shed. Once they shed, I put them in the very small tubs. They're the Reptile Basics hatchling racks. And
I know exactly what you're talking about. We have those actually.
So the really small ones that are probably like an inch and a half wide. I don't use those. I use the double of that. So with that rack, you put two of them in, but it's only, what is it? Like an inch tall.
Yeah. It's very,
very, very very short.
So they go in that with a paper towel, 2-ounce water dish, toilet paper, or paper towel roll for a hide. Leave them in there for a couple days. I'm not real big on, okay, if they shed yesterday, let's feed them today, and I'll give them a little bit of time. But then I just thaw out day old pinkies and put them in there on the paper towel and close the tub and come back the next day.
Damn.
So
I'm like shaving chicks and putting down on pinkies and brown bagging doing the old school brown bag trick. What we ended up figuring out is that I don't think that they were warm enough. But I mean, I felt bad because I was like, I'm cooking these things. I got a tub from Walmart that had a locking lid, burned some air holes in it. When I say locking, I don't mean like a normal tub. Those gasketed lids where you get a really solid seal.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. And I got a herpstat that we had, and I dropped the probe down in there, and I pumped them up to about 88 degrees. And I basically was like, I'm going to science the crap out of this thing. I'm going to make them eat because I'm going to make their metabolism so freaking like booming that it's going to kick in the appetite. And it did work. And I put all my little Baronii in the brown bag with a live pink in this tub. And I didn't open it for 48 hours. I felt horrible for the pinkies that weren't eaten. But after doing that, everybody ate. And the thing about Baronii is that once they eat, boom, they're off. And
they're off. Yep.
They're like the false water cobras with their feeding response, as far as I'm concerned. Like, they're wonderful snakes with that, but it's just that getting them to go. But we've done 2 or 3 clutches here, and we lost a couple because he just starved to death. Like, they just wouldn't eat. So I think
did any of your females double clutch?
One of them did. Well, we only have the one female. She double clutched 1 year. Our male that is our breeder, I'm actually retiring him this year. He's kind of old. He's also blind, which is really interesting. So, but I have a grow out male that is going to be taking his place. And it was funny. I probably could have used him. They're all together in a great big animal plastics stack. We keep them in the animal plastics T25s, which are 6 feet long, 18 inches tall, and about 2.5 feet deep. They're real deep. And the females have, a whole run to themselves. And then the boys each have basically half of that. And the one male during the breeding season, because I do a week brumation with them, he refused food and was zooming. And I know that was because he could sense the females were there. So I'm wondering if he can get it done with the large female we have. But next year, Baronii is kind of high on my list to try to get some more animal just for the school.
Did you say you do a week brumation, like a light brumation, or a 1 week long brumation?
Oh, no. When I say week, I mean around Thanksgiving time, I turn off all the herpstats, and I basically at nighttime. So it's more of it's exactly what you do with carpet python.
Like pythons, okay.
The nighttime lows are super important to dipsadded snakes. I found when I did all the research for the book. If you actually look at the thermal profiles for the month, daytime, the day it's getting up into the 70s, but at nighttime it can be dropping all the way down to the 40s. So I started doing that with all of ours here at the school. And when I did that with the false water cobras, my production of false water cobras reached astronomical levels, which is why I've produced over 150 of them this year with 3 females. Like, that's insane.
Crazy.
So,
wow.
So, and that's not burning them out. Like, they're good to go. So I want to do that with the Baron Eye. It's just, I think I'm having fertility issues with that male. So I'm curious to see if that goes down. When you bred your blues, you did blue to blue pairings. Did you only get blues, or did you get blues and greens and everything under the sun, or what came out the other end?
So they hatch green.
Yes.
But they all turn blue. Yeah, I didn't get any greens in there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And on your enclosures, how do you feel about that 18-inch height? Do you like that, or do you wish?
I wish it was higher.
Okay.
We have some enclosures here that are they're literally zoo like we have a big lab that we built-ins like you would see if you were in the reptile house at the zoo.
Cool.
And one of my secret imperatives is a cohabbed false water cobra Baron Eye enclosure, because we had a sloth. I kicked the sloth out, gave it back to the zoo, and then threw the false water cobras in that enclosure. And it's 8 feet tall. It's about 9 feet deep, and it's 4 feet wide. And the false water cobras, for the record, they go up like those giant beasts, which are basically the same dimensions as a black-headed python. They climb. They suck at it. They get up there, and you'll hear a thunk as they fall. But I really want to put the Baron Eye in there, because I am certain that they will be zooming.
Oh yeah,
all through those branches all the time. Mm-hmm.
That would be really cool. Yeah. To go to your point on the venom, when I ship mine out, when you open up the package, there's a disclaimer on the as soon as you open it, it says, "This is a rear fang snake," and I cite, that paper.
I know the paper.
The paper. I cite that paper in my disclaimer, and I say, this is the human reactions of venom of this snake on humans, and that Ophiurcii, Ophiurcii, is responsible for a human fatality. So my fear is that somebody that's wants a pretty blue snake, buys my pretty blue snake and doesn't know the ecology of the snake and doesn't know that, and then it's cute, it's biting me, and then something catastrophic happens. Like that's my fear, and we're so lucky that they are not prone to bite.
Yes,
because if they were, they would be impossible to handle. Absolutely impossible to handle.
They whip around quite a bit. Here at the school, we have beginner, moderate, advanced, and they are absolutely advanced. And it's really just me and the other professor that are allowed to manage them. And when they come out after a prey item, if you're not using, like, there's tongs, and they never leave my desk. Like, these are too small for Baron Eye. You can't see them. I think that these are our 15-inch tongs. We don't feed them unless we have the 2-foot tongs, just simply because they lose their minds in the presence of food. And they do that thing that a king snake will do, where they kind of open their mouth, and ours do, at least here, and they just flail in every direction. And everything they come in contact with, they do a little quick, like, pop. And if it's your forearm or your finger, that's tissue, and they pop it. And I don't think, like, it's not malicious. They just are in food mode, and they just don't care. They're going to, grab it. It's definitely worth discussing that whenever we talk about Baron Eye. Our female is really unique. She's actually in the book. She came out when I purchased her. She was green. And then she started to get this kind of ugly brown color along the dorsum of her back. And there are brown Baron Eye, but this was like brown and green. And at the time, I was like, oh my God, you look like vomit. Like, it literally looked like vomit. It's like, this is the ugliest Baron Eye on earth. But she went through an ugly duckling phase. And then she came out of that. And when she reached adulthood, she became jet black on top. And then she's this really cool, it's not blue, it's not green. It's kind of the perfect intermediate between the two. But what's been really interesting with her babies is that she produces, if she produces 10 offspring, 9 of them will be green, and they haven't grown up yet, and they're across the country right now. So I'm curious to see what they ultimately look like. But she has produced blues, so there's blues in there, and I have one of the blues that that's one of the few snakes that I took from here home to raise out, and that is actually not. I don't mean to swear, but it's the only appropriate term. She's batshit. Like she does. She's the only Barons racer I've seen that is extremely defensive. And defensively bites, and that is a scary thing to witness. Yeah. That is why she's at my house. Like, I wanted to keep her because she was blue, but I thought blue bear and I with 19-year-olds that don't know what the hell they're doing is not a good mix. So she will forever be at my home.
So real quick, guys, for my ignorance here, we talk about the blue, so we talk, greens, and you said that even some browns here. So are these colors, are these more or less kind of like chondros where, when you're breeding for a certain look, you're more likely to get it with this pair, but you really don't know how that baby's going to turn out? Or what's the kind of these color phases? Can you talk about those at all as far as where they come from, how they, how you're going to produce them? What's the likelihood? What
appears to happen is blue times blue usually makes blue, and brown times brown usually makes brown, and you can have greens literally make anything. But most of the time, green times green equals green. But there are people that have blues that will produce greens and blues, and there are people that have greens that will produce greens and browns, or they have greens that will produce greens and blues. And then you've got these black animals, which is kind of like, what the hell is going on with that? So one of the cool things about Barons racers, in my opinion, is they just kind of they're starting to pick up steam, like have a real diverse, dedicated following, I think is the best way to put that. And now the line breeding starting to happen, and I'm pretty sure their genetics, I don't think it's just recessive and I think there's some polygenics going on there, or some codominance, or there's definitely weird stuff. But at the same time, if you've got the right two animals, like what Terry has, they're just going to produce blues the whole time.
Gotcha. And I guess that was kind of my question is, was it a locality thing? Was it, where these popped up? But it sounds like there's still a little bit more to
and then there's the stripe too. So some of them will have a really well-defined stripe, and some of them will have a weak stripe, and some of them will be striped halfway down the body, and some of them won't have any stripe at all, and all in the same clutch,
they're just fantastic snakes.
They are really, really cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we've kept you here a long time, Terry. So thank you for being with us as long as you've been. We just kind of touched on Bear and I. We'd love to have you back to talk about Bear and I. We'd love to have you back to talk about rhino rats.
You bet.
We've talked about rhino rats in the past, but everybody that is a rhino rat connoisseur, I've realized everybody does something a little bit different than everybody else. And, just kind of getting all of that documented in the podcast is just the whole reason why the podcast exists. So if you're willing to come back, we would love to have you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I wonder, a rhino rat snake roundtable has never been done, Rob Stone and, I could think of Buddy Buscemi and Mike Curtin,
Matt,
Justin, Matt, yes, absolutely. Matt.
If we can get them cornered.
Cool. If we're going to do this, we're going to have a round table. It's going to be a handful of Barons guys, a handful of Rhino guys.
That'll be the
title. The title of that episode is going to be Tonight We Settle This.
Well, okay. So look, I don't have a dog in the fight, but I will say a Facebook friend of mine mentioned, hey, can you cohab a Barons racer and a Rhino rat snake? And I said, absolutely not.
Yes.
And they said, why? And I said, well, first of all, it's just not smart. Right. I said, you can do whatever you want, but two snakes kept in two separate enclosures will never eat one another. I said, there will never be a problem. But I said, if you put those in there, I said, the possibility is there. And I said, I can almost guarantee that Barons racer is going to eat that rhino rat snake. Right. And he goes, all right. I told my friend, but we'll see what he does. It was like a week or two later, he sends me pictures and he says, you'll never believe it. the rhino rat snake ate the Barron's racer.
Yes.
And these were juveniles. These weren't adults. These were juveniles. Wow. And I just
hurts me.
I said if I hadn't seen a picture of it, I never would have believed it. You know?
Yeah, I cannot remember for the life of me because it's 10:30 at night. We had a guest on that brought that up. That was the result, that the rhino rat ate the Barron eye, and ever since then, I've been knocked down a peg because I was convinced the Barron eye would eat the rhino rat. I don't, and they're too damn expensive to do round 2. Not that we would want to do that, but so.
And you know, when I heard that, when my room was in a guest bedroom, not a guest, I mean, it was just a different bedroom, right? So when I was in my house, I had like my rhino rat cages, like kind of a wall of rhino rat cages, and I had this reticulated python that I would let kind of free roam the room while I was out. Same with that tiger rat snake, I do the same thing. And when I had these snakes out, it was the weirdest thing that all the rhino rat snakes would be very interested in watching that snake. They would be watching the snakes, you know, and almost like, I don't know, like more than curiosity, you know, almost like a feeding response. And it just seems so strange to me. I was like, why are they doing that? You know, why are they doing that? So I don't know if there's something to that. And maybe they're ophiophagous to other snakes, just not their own. And we just haven't figured it out yet. Because we're not, you know, you're not keeping them with corn snakes or you know, but I don't know. Yeah. The things you learn, you know,
the things you learn, man.
Yeah.
So as stated, thanks for coming on. Fantastic episode as usual for us, but this one was really good because really interesting stuff. Especially talking about, you know, the Cynodon, which don't get that much love. So that's pretty fantastic. But if people want to see your snakes or reach out to you, or you have offspring and they heard about them on this episode and they might be interested, how do people reach out to you and find you? Or do you want people to find you?
Yeah. Actually, I think it'd be fantastic. I would love to be sold out of snakes by Thanksgiving. So that would be absolutely wonderful. You can, I'm on Instagram at Terry Burwell. I'm not super active, but I am on there. I'm a mortgage loan officer. Like, loan officers are like real estate agents. We're really easy to get a hold of. My phone number is all over the internet. If you want to call me, it's 864-887-3870. Shoot me a text, call me. Be happy to talk snakes. Alternatively, my email address is burwell.terry@gmail.com. So hit me up. I got diamond pythons, Sumatran shorttails, Boiga cynodon, Angolan pythons, ball pythons, and I should have some cyanea and maybe some adult male rhino rat snakes if you're listeners of this podcast. So hit me up.
Perfect.
Love it.
All right. And if you want to get a hold of us, as usual, Dr. Crawdad on Instagram, Zach Loafman on Facebook. I'm just going to keep saying it probably until next July, because that's how long it's going to take me to get rid of them. But false water cobras, there's a special for listeners, and a lot of you have taken me up on that. So in fact, I don't think I've sold a false water cobra to anybody this year that wasn't a listener to the podcast, which I really like, because I can get a hold of you, because I love to see what the snakes are doing and all that jazz. So please hit me up on that. Potential grad students, reach out to me. Talk to 2 at Tinley. I didn't think Tinley could be a recruiting event, but it was, and that made my bosses at the university happy. So there's that. But please reach out. We're doing lots of things. Got a relationship brewing with the St. Augustine Crocodile Farm right now, and the projects we'll be doing there. I talk about 10-year-old Zach all the time. He's going to stroke out and die if we get to do that stuff. And I need grad students for that. So there's that. Clint, if people need to get a hold of you, where do they go?
You can find me personally at Clint Bartley on Facebook. You can follow us at Metazotics on Facebook. Instagram, it's Metazotics LLC. And obviously check us out online, metazotics.com. And as always, we have a coupon code for CC Radio listeners, and it is CC Radio. And currently it is 15% off of anything on the website. Even if it's on sale, you can still use the coupon on top of it. So use it.
All righty. So with that being said, thank you all. It's been a fantastic episode. No matter what time of day it is, I hope you're having a good one. And later.